Alright, so let's look at numbers 10, 11, and 12 from Prep Test 60 Game 2. Prep Test 60 is June 2010. Number 10 says, if Jelani appears earlier than Mitchell, which one of the following could be the order in which the other four actors appear from earliest to latest? Okay, so let's think about this question over here on the side. They tell us that Jelani appears earlier than Mitchell. And they want to know what we can figure out about the other variables, in this case G, H, L, and P. So let's try to think about this. If J is coming before M, are there any of the other sequencing rules that we can attach onto this JM sequence that they gave us? Well, one thing we know for sure is that the L and the P are going to come before the J, right? L and P are going to come before the J. So we can go ahead and, actually I can just copy this and drag it over here and say that these guys are definitely going to come before the J. Okay? So that's one thing we can do for sure. And now we want to see if there's anything else we can do. And over here on the first rule we have the fact that we have the fact that M is going to come before H. So again, I can copy this and drag it over here. And so I have this line now because I know that the M is going to come before the H. So I have almost everybody included on this new line that I created for question 10 except for G. So I need to think for a second to see if there's anything that I can say about where G is going to go. And this rule, you might think you would at least need to consider and see if it applies or not. The rule applies when M is before P, but in this case P is clearly before M, so this rule is not going to apply. Alright, this rule becomes irrelevant. The only other rule we have about G is this no-go over here, the fact that G cannot be sixth. So what does that mean? Well, it means that the G would have to come before somebody, at least. And in this case, the person who we know it would have to come before is going to be H, because right now H is coming after everybody else. So the G at least would have to come before the H in order to avoid being last. So we can say, not that. We can, let's see if this will work. No, not really. Let's try one more time. Nope. Abandon that. And let's do it a different way. We can just say that, look, the G is going to come somewhere before the H. Okay? So we know the G is going to come somewhere before the H. We don't know exactly where, but we just know it's going to come somewhere before the H. Okay, so now we seem like as long as we can manage this diagram, we're in position to answer the question. What they want us to do is tell them what the order of the other variables besides J and M can be. So in other words, the L and the P, the H, and the G. So what kind of things do we know? Well, we know that L and P are going to come before H, G is going to come before H, which means we know H is going to be last. Okay, so that might be one thing that when we're checking the answer choices they give us, we want to look for, and if it's not there, then we can get rid of that answer choice. That seems like the simplest part of what we know. And indeed, when we look at the answer choices for number 10, the only answer choice that puts H last is A, and therefore that can be the only answer that's correct. All right. So when you look at B, C, D, and E, I was gonna go. I could go through them individually, but really I'm gonna rule them all out on the same basis, which is that H is not last in B, C, D, and E, but H would have to be last given the information they gave us. All right. So I'm gonna start trying to keep the old work somewhere nearby, so that. Well, let's see. Actually, get rid of this, so that we can look back at it and try to use it if we need to for other questions and stuff like that. So let's just say that this was number 10, and let's put it aside for now. But maybe it'll come in handy later. Okay, let's go to number 11. Yikes! Sorry about that. Let's go to number 11. Number 11 says, if Lynn appears immediately before Gayer, then which one of the following must be true? So in this case, and again I'll try to create a little box here. So this is number 11, and what they're telling us is that Lin appears immediately before Geyer. So this is going to be a block. It's going to be Lin and then Geyer, and it's going to be a block. So we can draw the block around it. Okay, and now what they want us to tell them is what must be true. So let's do the same thing we did with number 10, and the same thing you do with almost every question. And let's do a little bit of analysis before we look at the answer choices. But that should especially be true for must be true questions, because they're telling you that you should know something based upon what they gave you. Okay, so you definitely want to try to do some analysis when they give you a must be true question, extra information, take the extra information and figure out what follows from it. So if Lin is before Geyer, we go back to our sequencing rules and we say, okay, well, Lin is immediately before Geyer, so Lin also has to be before, remember, Lin has to be before H and Lin has to be before J. So this block, the Lin-Geyer block, has to also be before H and before J. So what we can say is, we don't know the order of the H and the J. We don't know the order they're going to go in, but we do know that whatever order they go in, they're going to have to come after the L and the G. All right, so we can make these bigger so you guys can see it, and that gets us started. Now, who's left? We have P and M left. And is there anything we can know about P? So this rule finally comes into play, right? If M comes before P, then H has to come before G. What is the contrapositive of that? It's if G comes before H, or rather I should say if H does not come before G, then M does not come before P. So let me repeat that and maybe even write it down here, since I kind of stumbled my word, when I stumbled over my words when I was trying to say it. So let's say that if since there are no ties, I feel comfortable saying that the contrapositive is this, that if G is before H, then P is before M. And the reason I feel comfortable saying that is because, normally we're supposed to reverse and negate, so we're supposed to say not H not before G. But if H is not before G, since there are no ties in this game, then that means that G is before H, and if M is not before P, that means P is before M. Okay, so the other thing we know in this case then, see here we have G before H. So if G is before H, the contrapositive says that P should be before M. So the other thing we know is that P is going to be before M. Now, I'm just being very thorough in the way that I'm doing my analysis. You guys, if you on the test and you're short of time, once you had this information, you might try to look for the answer based upon, the fact that the LG block has to be before both H and J, sorry. But I just went ahead and, thought about the other two guys and tried to figure out if we have any information about what their order is going to be like. We do actually know that the M is going to be before the H as well, right? So we should keep that in mind. I think if I tried to join the two diagrams, like this top one with just the P before the M, it might start to look messy and get messy. And for me, I'd rather just keep it separate and not make a mistake and not confuse myself. But I do need to remember that M is going to come before H. Okay, so let's see what must be true. Geyer appears no later than third. That's what A says. A says Geyer appears no later than third. Now, that does not have to be true. Remember, I've said before, in a process of elimination on a must be true, so when you're doing process of elimination on a must be true question, if you don't know the answer ahead of time, then when you're going through the answers, what you want to do is try to avoid doing what they suggest in the answer choice. So here they're suggesting that Geyer could appear no later than third. So the way we prove this is not the answer is to show that in fact Geyer could be later than third, and the place that he could be that's later than third is fourth, right? We know H and J are going to come after, so he couldn't be fifth or sixth, but he could be fourth, and the P and the M can be shifted towards the front before G. Okay, so A is not right because Geyer could be fourth. What about, they say Henson appears last? Does that have to be true? And that does not have to be true, right? Why does that not have to be true? Because we could put Henson fifth. Okay, the M and the P are going to come before the H, so there are going to have to be at least four people: the L, the G, the P, and the M before the H. But the J does not have to be before the H. Remember, we drew this way to indicate that we don't know the order between the H and the J. So if we were clear in our diagram, then hopefully when we look to consider answer choice B, we can see that that does not have to be true. Now we look at C, and it says Lin appears no later than third. No later than third. So we try to avoid doing what they say here. We try to put Lin in fourth, fifth, or sixth, But the problem is that Lin does indeed have to have 3 people come after him. Lin has to have G after, G has to be after L, H has to be after L, and J has to be after L. So indeed, there are only 6 spaces, and he has to have 3 people after, there have to be 3 people after Lin, which means that Lin actually cannot be later than 3rd. So C is going to be our answer here. Just really quickly, let's look at D and E and show why they, in fact, do not have to be true. D says Mitchell appears earlier than Gayer. Does Mitchell have to appear earlier than Gayer? No. We know that Mitchell has to appear earlier than H, but we could take the M and put it between the G and the H. It has to be before the H, but it could be after the G. There's no rule that suggests otherwise, so we can prove that that does not have to be true. And then E says Paredes appears first. That could be true, but it does not have to be true, and that's what we want to focus on. We can put the P after the G. There's no rule saying that it has to go before the G. It could go afterwards, so E does not have to be true either. So that takes us through question 11. Okay, let's look at number 12. I'm going to do it kind of quickly because I need to get under the 15-minute time limit for YouTube. In number 12, they tell us if Mitchell appears first, or they ask us, if Mitchell appears first, which one of the following must be true? So Mitchell's going to be first. And we need to look at our rules and say, all right, what do they want us to think if Mitchell is going to be first? What rule are they triggering, or what kind of analysis do they want us to do? I think when you ask yourself that question, the rule you end up with is here. M before P, then H is before G. The reason that I say that is because if M is going to be first, then we know that this rule is going to be triggered, that M in fact will have to be before P because M is going to be before everybody. So what follows from that, if M is first, then right away we know that since M is going to be before P, then we have this sequence between H and G. Sorry, we have this sequence between H and G. Okay, and now let's see if we can build on this sequence. So we know that H is going to be here, but we look over here at this rule and we see that L and M are both going to be before H. Okay, originally we didn't know the relationship between L and M, but now because M is going to be first, we know the relationship between L and M. We know that M will come before L, and that both of them, the L and the M, will come before the H. Okay, so now the question is, we have these 4 straightened out in terms of their relative sequence, but who's left? And the answer is we have P and J left. So do we have any rules about P and J? And it turns out that we know that P is always going to come before J. So we don't want to keep that in our head, so we'll quickly write that down also. And now we just want to see if there's any way that we can connect these 2 sequences. Okay, so connect the P before J sequence to this MLHG sequence. When we look at our rules, we'll see that, you know, there are some rules about P and J, but we've already used those rules, and those rules are not going to connect the 2 sequences until we get to the rule that says G cannot be last, which is here. Okay, so since G cannot be last, this right now poses a problem because in this sequence, G does appear to be last. So we need to make sure that one of the 2 variables who is not on this MLHG sequence actually goes after the G. Okay, and it actually has to take the 6th spot because G cannot be 6th. Now, which one is it going to be, P or J? Well, we know the P can't be 6th because the P has to come before the J. So it looks like the only person who's left to go after, who's left to go in the 6th spot. I shouldn't say who's left to go after G. P can certainly go after G, but the only person who's going to go in the 6th spot is going to be J. So we know J is going to be 6th, and we know M is going to be first. What about the P? Well, we just know that the P is going to be somewhere after the M, okay, somewhere after the M, and somewhere before the J. Okay, so this is going to be the P, and let's make that bigger. Okay, so just to be clear, and to make sure you're reading this diagram correctly, the P can go anywhere from after the M to before the J. So it can go before or after L, before or after H, before or after G. And because of that, it can affect the position of L, H, and G, because, if we put it before L, then obviously L will go 3rd, but if we put it after L, then L will go 2nd, and then the same kind of analysis holds for H and G. The only placements that we really know for sure then are going to be M and J. But M was given to us in the question, so we fully expect J being last to be the answer here. And again, I'm going fast because I'm running out of time, but when we look at the answer choices, that's what we see. We see C is the right answer because we know that J is going to have to go 6th. Okay, and when you look at the other answer choices, hopefully you'll be able to see how the fact that P is moving relative to the L, H, and G means that you don't know the placement of any of those variables. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this video up. That was number 12, and I will see you in the next video.